kick off. I see Louise come on.
Yeah.
Louise, do you want to do the introduction? So we're going to start with a staff story today. Welcome to the open board meeting. So we're going to start with the staff story, and then we'll carry on with the more formal proceedings in 30 minutes time. So Louise, do you want to do the introductions?
Yeah, I will do, happy to. Welcome to colleagues today. We have a number of colleagues from the team online. Fred, who is the head of therapies, Rachel, I'm probably going to get your title wrong, so please forgive me, but is the senior manager of this service. But the member of staff who has agreed to come and share her story and talk to us is Alex, or Alexandra, or Alex. So apologies if I'm being too informal. So we received a fabulous letter from a patient a while back who described the transformation of her life and her well-being as a result of us being able to think about how we did our therapy rehabilitation in a different way. And we thought it was a fantastic story for the board to hear. Obviously, the impact of being able to deliver clinical services in a non-acute hospital setting has become even more critical over the last few months. So I suppose even more useful to hear the story about how we did it, and for the team to share their experience and to give us some feedback in terms of the things that have gone well and maybe, the things that don't work quite so well in this scenario. So I think that's probably all I wanted to say is in terms of introduction.
Okay, and we normally introduce ourselves, which is far more challenging on Teams. So I'm going to go down my list of attendees and just ask people to introduce themselves. So if we've heard from the team, that's fine. So Andrea.
Hi there. Yeah, Andrea Lewis. I'm chief nurse.
Mike.
Hi, Mike Baxter, non-executive director. Hi.
Chris.
Hi, I'm Chris Ketley. I'm a non-exec director as well.
David.
Hello there. My name is David Clark. I'm the medical director here.
James.
Hi, I'm James Thomas. I'm the chief operating officer.
Jane.
Hi, I'm Jane Dale, a non-executive director.
Keith.
Yep, Keith Malcaron, non-executive director.
Louise, you've heard from. Marcin. Are you there, Marcin?
He's having a bad day.
Finger trouble.
I'm Marcin Waterman, Deputy Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. Lord Andrew.
Andrew Mawson, Special Advisor.
Merrick.
Merrick Views, non-exec director.
All right, Rachel, we've got Sal.
Hello, I'm Sal Morn, Associate Director of Corporate Affairs and Governance.
Simon.
Simon Marshall, Director of Finance and Information. Hi.
Suzanne.
Hi, good morning. Suzanne Rankin, Chief Executive.
And Tom.
Hi, Tom Smurden, Director of Strategy and Sustainability.
And Neil, do you want to? Neil's here as an observer.
Hi, Neil Wagstaff. I'm observing the board today.
And Yvonne.
Hello, Alex. I'm Yvonne Abuaya, Associate Non-Executive Director.
And last but not least, Liz.
Hello, Corporate Affairs Manager, Board Secretary.
And I'm Andy Fields, I'm the chairman. And the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Hi, I'm Alex. I'm one of the Band 7 physiotherapy leads at St Peter's Hospital until tomorrow. So I am just going to present to you today some of the data that we've collected from using the Riverbourne services, and just present to you some of the feedback that one of our junior staff has been collecting And I think there are a couple of slides possibly to go with this. I don't know if people will be able to see them, but there's just a couple of word clouds as well to go with this. Does anyone know if the slides are visible? Sorry, I'm working off my iPad today.
We've all seen them. They were circulated with our board packs. Thanks, Alex.
Perfect, thank you. Okay, so thanks first for inviting me to talk. It's really a privilege to be able to talk in front of you. To begin with, just to introduce really why we started doing the Riverbourne project. So we had early in 2019 decisions made about redeveloping the physiotherapy department and creating space for a 48-bedded ward, which was really required for the hospital. So there were initial plans about relocating to Woking. Unfortunately, this didn't come about due to various issues. So Rachel Parrott had to quickly sort a new solution about how to relocate our physiotherapy services into the community and enable us to continue these services throughout the time of the building works. So we wanted to continue to provide the excellent services that we provide within the outpatient physiotherapy department. And we're potentially the first NHS trust in the UK to work with the local facilities to provide these services. So it soon became apparent that using the facilities at Riverbourne Health Club would not only benefit the hospital, but would also benefit our patients. Riverbourne provides the opportunity for us to use the latest equipment and offer very high level and sport specific rehabilitation, but also using the health club to, sorry, door's just gone, typical. So using the health club would help to demedicalise our treatment for our patients and encourage the uptake of our healthy lifestyle. So we hope that the use of community facilities would increase the efficacy for our patients within using leisure facilities, but also increase the uptake of community exercise referral schemes and things such as the social prescribing schemes. And in addition to this, Riverbourne would offer much cheaper parking, which was often a complaint our patients would make. So in July 2019, we began running our first education and exercise programs along with hydrotherapy classes. And we run a total of 12 exercise classes with 4 hydrotherapy sessions. And this is inclusive of musculoskeletal outpatient physio, pelvic health, and also pediatrics. So throughout the week, we would offer these classes, but we'd also start to offer rehabilitation classes, which are smaller groups that are offered on the gym floor, which help patients who perhaps require more one-to-one support, either for anxiety or because they needed high-level, more specific rehabilitation. So the aim of using the Riverbourne facility was to encourage further self-management within our patients whilst introducing programs for our high-level athletes and also our more anxious patients. We wanted to instill confidence within our patients, but also reduce the fear of using gym equipment so that they felt they could manage independently their own condition. But alternatively, service users may require a change in their usual gym program to suit their needs. And this was something then that we could go through with them. We could see what they usually do and then just adapt this. So in July 2019, between July and 2019 and March 2020, we've had a total of 4,621 patients booked into physiotherapy appointments at the Riverbourne. And 3,881 of these were attended. And this was for musculoskeletal, pediatric and pelvic health teams. But to break that down further, 3,864 of these appointments were musculoskeletal, 293 were pediatric patients, and 464 of these were pelvic health patients. And this was between both classes within the gym setting, but also hydrotherapy appointments within the swimming pool. We had 2,421 class appointments attended and 1,460 hydrotherapy appointments. We've only had a 16% DNA rate within all of our appointments. So we understand that patients are really, really enjoying this facility. But to support that argument, Gemma Clark, one of our Band 5 physios at the time, now a Band 6, she collected feedback from our patients who attended the Riverbourne classes, inclusive of musculoskeletal physio, women's health and paediatrics. 81 patients completed this questionnaire, and 100% reported that they were treated with kindness, compassion, dignity and respect. And 99% reported that they would recommend Riverbourne, apart from 1% being that 12-year-old boy who reported he wasn't quite sure. So 73% reported that they would like to continue to attend the gym. And interestingly, 21% reported that they would prefer to exercise at home. And this is where we feel that our virtual classes we're now running would help to address this with our patients and improve our patient experience, to run alongside those face-to-face classes that we can hope to run again. So I hope that gives you a little bit of an insight into what we've been doing at Riverbourne and how many patients we've had come through the door. But it's been really, really successful. On the slides that you saw earlier, there's 2 word clouds. The first word cloud shows the positive feedback that we've had from patients. And the second word cloud shows things that we can improve. And largely patients are really, really happy. And we've been trying to make some tweaks to adjust those changes as they've reported.
Great, thank you, Alex. That's we've heard a lot about the patients, rightly, but how are you lot feeling about being there and working there, and what's it like?
Fantastic. So it's really, really good fun working within the gym environment. I think for us, it creates a more relaxed environment. So we're still professional in the way we deliver our care, but it, like I said before, it demedicalizes the whole environment. So you can have more personal conversations with patients, but also create our rehab plans to suit our patients a lot better, and that gives us more job satisfaction. But within the environment of working within a gym, I think because we're in that relaxed environment, it feels a bit more it feels a bit more chilled, a bit more it's just nicer working with patients.
Oh, great. So, questions for the team.
Andy, shall I go first?
Yes, Louise.
Yeah. Thank you so much for telling us that. Now, obviously, one of the things that that we heard about when we talked about this at Tech, Fred, you'll remember there was a letter from a patient who described how it had transformed her life because she'd never considered going to a gym before, but actually the confidence that you've been able to build with her in the circumstances with her rehabilitation meant that she'd found that confidence, she'd subscribed and become a member of the gym, and she'd also been able to sort of, kind of think about how her lifestyle and, just a completely different approach to life. So I'm just wondering, is that something that was a common feature for patients, or was that a one-off story for us? And Rachel, Fred, I don't know whether you've got any other additions that you want to, please feel free to jump in if you have.
So if we talk about that specific patient to begin with, I think for her, she had multiple issues, and often with CRPS, it is related to not only mental health, but also physical well-being and general lifestyle health. So although there was a massive impact on her specifically, and being able to just change from being completely agoraphobic and unable to leave the house to now going to the gym every day or even twice a day for all the 7 days of the week, but also managing to manage her own mental health and that independence. And I think that was the key with her, is that actually there was a huge lifestyle change as a result. I think we've had smaller changes with other patients, but there are still a lot of patients who are terrified of entering that gym environment. And because unfortunately we were forced into using the gym environment because that was the only facility we could use with the building works going on, it actually enabled us to support these patients going into this environment. And there's certainly quite a few patients who I've seen coming through to my rehab clinic or my colleague's rehab clinic, which runs at the same time, and I've recognized them coming back through the door again. And the nice thing about working within a local leisure centre facility is we're always around, so that we're always on the gym floor. Even if we're not working with those patients, they'll quite often say, "Oh, hi, how are you?" And they really enjoy that. And I think it's knowing that we're around and giving that support if they need it is really, really supportive for them in terms of battling their fears. And some of them have, like I said, never even contemplated going onto the gym floor before and terrified at using the equipment, but have completely changed their life around. And it's not only them, it's them having that impact on their families as well. Like the lady who wrote the letter about going to the gym and it completely changing her life. She's also got her son involved, and her son now goes to the gym, who used to just play computer games and was also heading down the same route as she was, and she didn't want him to end up in the same situation. So she's actually managed to get him going to the gym regularly with her, and that's really, really good to hear that actually it's infectious and people are going with their families now as well.
Great, thank you.
Great. Well, we've got a lot of questions and comments coming in. So, Andrew, would you like to go next?
Yeah, that's all sounded really good, and it brings back very many memories for me in the early days of Bromley by Bow, when we began to open up and introduce some of these fitness and leisure facilities and connect it to the GP practice and others, and obviously where we pioneered a lot of the thinking behind social prescribing. So that was all encouraging to hear what you're saying, and all the add-ons that start to happen, which you're describing when you create those sorts of connections and relationships. And we're starting to work with the local authorities actually to think about some of this more joined up thinking and some specific sites. And as I look online, I understand you're down in Chertsey, aren't you?
Yeah, so...
Yeah. Can you tell me how near you are to the town centre? Because we're just starting to look with the local authority there, the potential, they're thinking about the redevelopment of the town centre there and the Sainsbury's site and all of that stuff and possible links into GP practice. Can you just help me understand where you are in that geography? And then separate to this, maybe offline after this meeting, it would be good to talk to you and to maybe make contact about what you're doing and some of the thinking we're starting to do in that area. But maybe you could just help me understand that geography.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's really exciting to hear that, because that's actually something we'd looked at a couple of years ago. Rachel and myself had looked at trying to link the falls prevention programme with the local authorities and GPs, and actually trying to avoid medicalising that as well, and creating that sort of club, if you like, atmosphere rather than a medical appointment. So yeah, in terms of location, we are on the same road as Sainsbury's, so we use the library park.
Okay.
And it's literally right at the end of the high street, so it's prime location, and that's a really important factor actually when considering these services, is the ability for patients to get there by public transport, because a lot of our patients use buses, etc., to get there, but also having the ability to park there and get there in a timely fashion for their classes as well.
No, that's very good. That's very helpful. Thank you. And communicate with me afterwards. That would be good.
Yeah, of course.
Tom, if you could make that connection, please, so that we can take that forward, that's great.
Yeah,
Jane?
very happy.
Jane?
Thank you. I'm Jane Dale, one of the non-executive directors. Thank you very much. It's a very exciting project, and I've got two questions. First one is, what are the plans for the project going forward? Is it an ongoing project? Is it going to be expanded? And for patients who have gone through a programme, is the capacity in the current facilities for them to all go to the gym? Or will we get to a stage where actually we'll have encouraged people to go, but there won't be capacity? And the second question is about the questionnaires, and that's how did you collect from all people that attended, or was it because it's quite a small number? I was just interested in sort of how you targeted, who you asked, what their opinions were.
Sure. So sorry, what was the first part?
The first question was around the ongoing plans for the service, and whether once people get excited about going to the gym and feel confident, if the capacity of the gym will be such that in a year's time there'll still be enough spaces for people to attend, or how we will address that, because you don't want to switch it on and switch it off, really.
Of course. So in terms of the capacity, at the moment it seems as though gyms do have enough capacity for these exercise referral schemes that we're sending through. And of course, like with everything, there's a certain percentage of uptake, but there's also a percentage of drop off.
Yeah.
We find that we do refer a lot of patients to exercise referral schemes following attending the classes, but we're not entirely sure if all of these are taken up. And actually that's an area where we think there could be more development within the leisure services at monitoring the uptake of these referrals, and whether we can improve that pathway between us giving them a referral and it actually going through. Because it's a paper referral, we fill it in and the patient has to take it to the leisure centre. But if we could change that some way to make it electronic so that the numbers can be monitored, and the leisure centres could then make contact with the patient, it might take out that extra effort that it takes for the patient to get there. But yeah, certainly at the moment it seems as though the leisure centres do have capacity for the number of patients. And in terms of looking at whether we could expand this service, I believe there has been some talk about expanding it to other leisure centres. The difference between Riverbourne and these other leisure centres is that Riverbourne is private, although they do work with the council. Other leisure centres are council run only. And I feel that if we can get the council on board completely, then we'll obviously have a huge capacity to use all of the leisure centres in the area. But Riverbourne, being private, can make their own decisions about whether we're involved. So it's just trying to improve those links with the council, really. And then in terms of the questionnaire, we had a low uptake, but I think, again, that's a technological issue. So when you're treating patients in the gym, you don't have a desk, you don't have paperwork around. We have our Surface Go's, but largely they're in our bags, and we try not to be on the computer, obviously, all the time. So we were looking at trying to make it an electronic questionnaire, and therefore using iPads on the gym floor to ask patients to fill in after they've attended. The only patients that were asked to fill out a questionnaire were patients who were finishing their programme. So hence why we didn't get maybe as many, because they were still continuing their programme. But I think also having it electronic would make it a lot easier to gather that information, because at the moment you have to go find a pen, find a piece of paper in the cupboard somewhere, bring it out, and it just makes the appointment a bit disjointed.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so we're running a bit short of time, but we'll take James and then Chris, please.
Hi, Alex. Thanks very much for that presentation. It's fantastic. I'm interested in what it feels like working in that environment as a member of hospital staff, because it's one of our only environments that we sort of don't own or is not health related. So we work in lots of community hospitals, community clinics, but we don't have staff working like yourself. And I just wonder, how that feels like to be in that workplace. Do you sort of looked after at a practical level, but also, you know, feeling part of the trust as well, and that relationship?
Sure. So we actually have a really, really good relationship with the staff that work there at the moment. So we had a great relationship with the manager and the gym floor staff as well. So they were really, really supportive in communicating any issues. We would likewise communicate issues back to them as well. There have been some issues with patients turning up who perhaps were a little bit less familiar with that sort of area of the community. For example, we had an alcoholic arrive who was quite drunk at the time and inappropriate, and so it was a bit difficult for the reception staff then to have to deal with that patient, let us know, then we had to send someone out. So there have been a few issues like that, but we have managed to resolve them and come to agreements with the staff there, and it hasn't been a prolonged issue. We quite often have meetings with them as well, just about how we can improve how we're working within their environment, but also they let us know if there's anything that they can do to help us, or they've quite often asked if we feel that there's any equipment that we might need or would help our patients in terms of continuing that self-management if they join the gym, etc. So we've got quite a really good two-way sort of relationship with them at the moment, and I think that would be incredibly important, especially if we are going to expand it to other leisure centres, to make sure that there is that two-way support going on as well.
Thank you. Great, thanks.
James?
Sorry, I was going to say the only other thing about working in an environment that isn't ours is we don't have an office there, so we're working within the cafe area, and obviously that can be a bit difficult where you've got patients tapping you on the shoulders, I'm here. You're like, okay, thank you, you could go and take a seat. So that is probably one of the only issues that we've had, but our staff have been really sensible about it. We take ourselves off into a corner where possible, and sort of keep our screens non-visible by the public, etc. So but that's probably the only issue is sort of storage / office space for us is not there. But.
James, can I just add to that? Thank you, Alex. That there was a little bit of anxiety initially from staff, because obviously this was something new and they haven't done before. But actually, very quickly, as soon as they had a look around the facilities, there's a real buzz about the place. It's a really good facility. There's music and it's really active, and I think the therapists just loved it. I mean, there's a real energy there, which is great. Just to clarify, we don't put therapists full time there. They always do a combination of work at the hospital and some days at Riverbourne. So just to say that the staff have been really, really great and really flexible with it. Obviously, there may be it may not be for everyone, so there may be a small proportion of staff that wouldn't enjoy that, and obviously we've only involved the staff that we think would work best in that environment as well.
Thank you.
Okay, so Chris and then Yvonne.
Alexandra, thanks for that. I'm really inspired by it. Actually, it's a real step change from where we were. Not to say that wasn't good, but this is really great. On specifics, my understanding is, and correct me if I'm wrong here, that the primary purpose, it's great to see on your positives that people don't feel it's like a sort of a hospital, I don't feel like it's a hospital patient, which is great. But I guess the primary reason you're doing this is for rehabilitation and recovery. And so my question was, in terms of what more could you have? Why do people want tougher exercises? Is that at a point where they're at recovery and they want to move to the next stage of gym exercises?
So we actually use a lot of equipment during the recovery phase. So it's not necessarily making the exercises tougher. Actually, we have patients in there who are patients following a total hip replacement who don't walk very far usually, and they're relatively inactive. But actually, it's to try and encourage them long term to take a healthier lifestyle. And that those patients might just use the step up, and they might use the bike, or they might use one of the resistance bands, but it's getting them in that environment as well, and teaching them actually this isn't a young people's environment. It doesn't have to be just for the 20 to 30-year-olds or 20 to 50-year-olds maybe. It should be for the elderly population as well, and actually you can have a social experience. They quite often go and have a cup of tea afterwards and a piece of cake, and they meet other people, so it really becomes quite a holistic thing rather than just rehabilitation. But further to that, it's really important for us to have the access to that equipment. And I think our physios have definitely noticed the quality of the physio that they can give with the facilities, such as using free weights, using the weights machines, using an elliptical trainer with a treadmill, using a static bike can really, really help to aid the rehab that we're providing to our patients. So I think, we've looked at redeveloping our space in terms of moving out of the hospital, and I think those are really, really important factors that we need to take into consideration when we're redesigning our new facility, that actually these pieces of equipment, although expensive, are invaluable to helping our patients move forward.
Lovely. Thanks, that's very helpful, thank you.
Okay, and thanks, Alex, for saying that us over 50s are elderly, so that's fine. So we're going to take just two more questions, Yvonne and then Tom, and then I'll hand over to Suzanne for a kind of a sum up. So Yvonne.
Okay, Alex, that was really, really good feedback. And Andrew has already touched on the fact that it's covering the trust anchor institution strategy, which I think it's a great example of that. What I wanted to ask you was more about your virtual options that you touched on briefly, because I think that would really tick the recovery box. Have you thought a bit more about how that would look?
Yeah, of course. So it's currently discussions we're still having about how we move from now completely virtual to then face-to-face eventually. But the idea is that we could perhaps offer the virtual class as well as the face-to-face at the same time. So we're conscious that we don't want to be holding virtual classes from our own homes long term. We want to make sure that we are doing it in a professional environment, but using the gym studios, we could continue to film a virtual class whilst delivering a face-to-face class as well. We're conscious that we don't get the same relationship with our patients whilst we're doing virtual classes that we do in face-to-face. And that's particularly important when we're looking at chronic pain conditions. It's really important for us to be able to have maybe one-to-one conversations whilst the patient's exercising about their particular issues. And you can't do that, obviously, with a virtual class. But also, we're finding that patients tend not to ask too many questions when you're delivering it virtually. They tend to sit and watch, but they don't deliver back, whereas when you're having a face-to-face conversation, it's a bit more informal, and they seem to come out with questions or concerns that they have, and they create a rapport with the other people in the class. So I think although we want to continue to run it as an option because it does suit some people who have busy lives and are unable to usually attend classes, it's really important that we still have that face-to-face communication with our patients.
Sure.
Andy, you're on mute. Tom.
Yes, it was me who was on mute. Tom, sorry.
Are you bringing me in? I think what you've done is absolutely incredible. I mean, I think you said, Alex, didn't you, that you thought we were the first. I'm pretty sure you're right about that. So clearly we need to be highlighting that and to write it up and all the rest of it. I'm sure you're onto that. I mean, for me, it raises all sorts of questions about the role of the hospital and I suppose of the NHS. I mean, a lot of what you do, pretty much everything you do actually, is focused on getting people into encouraging a healthy lifestyle, getting them into prevention and all the rest of it. And of course, there's people generally do their preventative work, their health management kind of as consumers, and in the commercial sector, even gyms that are run by councils, often are private, you have to pay for them in general terms. There's a degree of inequity that comes naturally as a result of that, and we're not really involved in that work, but you have made a link into that world, and there are other examples, aren't there? So things that people do in the commercial world as consumers, like healthy eating, then are preventative things to deal with things like Crohn's disease and IBD that we treat in the NHS. And people spend a lot of money on good parenting books and all that kind of thing, and all that actually is good preventative stuff, that kind of feeds into kind of child's health. And I just think it's a really great example that you've created that allows us to really work out what our role is in that preventative work, which, as I say, is generally a kind of commercial world rather than the kind of publicly funded NHS world that we inhabit. So I'm not asking really necessarily for an answer around that. It would be helpful, though, to know whether there's any kind of views or insights from patients or maybe gym staff as to the role that we are playing, and whether or not there's anything more that we can do as the NHS to kind of get involved in that preventative side of things.
Yeah, I think having spoken to some of the staff who work within the gym sector as well, healthy lifestyle is actually a massive interest of theirs. It's not just about personal training a patient anymore, or a client. It's about the whole holistic view, and that's in the personal training world, not just in the health world. So there's definitely a link here that hasn't been linked. I think if we worked with such as Surrey Heartlands to look at whether we could involve the personal trainers on courses on prevention and teaching these prevention programs, they're already involved in providing sort of low impact classes, cardiovascular classes for the more elderly patients or higher risk patients. So why are we not teasing into the prevention side of things, the falls prevention, the respiratory disease prevention, like you say, the nutrition, the education? Because actually some of that doesn't really require a medical professional to deliver that program. If they're given the information and they're trained on that information, then it's something they can deliver, and that would then take out a huge huge burden on the NHS and what we have to do to then put it out into the community, and it would multiply. Then you could get so many more people through those doors.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, and it provides better outcomes for people ultimately, doesn't it? I mean, I think maybe obviously there's a link to be picked up with Andrew around the Chertsey redevelopment, but I think maybe we also need to pick up a link with the local integrated care partnership and the work of the primary care networks and so on. So I'm happy to facilitate that. I think it'd be really good actually for the ICP board to hear the presentation you've just given, if you're happy to do that, because I think there are huge opportunities there.
I think that's right, Tom. So I've let this run 10 minutes over because it's such fascinating, and it links so well with our strategy. It really is heart of it. So I'm just going to hand over to Suzanne for some closing thoughts on this.
Yeah, no, thank you, Andy, and thank you, Alex and Fred and Rachel, for putting this exemplar project. And as Andy says, and others have touched on, this is exactly why we have got an anchor institution strategy. I've had the fortunate opportunity to come down to Riverbourne and meet you guys, see the facilities, but also to meet the Riverbourne management team. And I think the question, what is our role in the local community, is we've really well described that in terms of the health and wellbeing agenda and the opportunity to create a different kind of working experience for the team and a therapeutic experience and access for patients. But the thing that also struck me in that conversation was that this is economic benefit to the local community. This is taking footfall into their facility. So they were extremely welcoming as a consequence of that, because actually they'd had quite an uplift in membership of the club, not least the sales of coffee and cake. And but as Alex also says, they run a number of other sort of social groups and clubs. So film night, for example, you know, so it's a really, you know, having sort of made this intervention, we've opened and given opportunity to other things for that patient group, and to create other connections and address loneliness and so on and so on and so on. So it's just a fantastic example, and I really thank you all for illuminating the kind of, you know, because we can talk about an anchor institution to our colleagues, but this describes beautifully, practically what we're talking about, and certainly Andrew, I spoke about connecting you up both with the Riverbourne team, but also and taking this example into Woking, where we're talking about a similar different specialty, but maybe similar opportunity in others. So I think there's just such a lot here, and I think, Alex, we do need to get this written up if you haven't, and I know you're all incredibly busy. So what I did share with Fred was, you know, if we need to put some support in to get this written up and published, both for internal consumption but also nationally, then we should get on with that. And thank you all very much.
Thank you. And
that sounds
thank
all
you,
right.
Alex. Thank you,
Right,
Fred. Thank you, Rachel. That's you are free to leave our open board meeting now. Thank you.
Fred, Rachel, Alex.
That was great, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Absolutely great. And just I can spot an award winner when I see one. So we could make a good deal with that. And it's such a shame, of course, with the current crisis that that's had to be suspended. But there we go. Right, we move on to the more formal part now. And I'm going to ask if there are any declarations of interest in anything that's on the agenda, please. Okay. We have an apologies for lateness. Neil is going to join us at 11, so he will. In fact, he may well have joined us by now. Can't see whether he's on or not, but he's going to be slightly late. Something going on there. No other apologies, Liz?
No other apologies.
Okay. Thank you. Right, so we'll move straight on to the draft minutes and the minutes of the open board meeting that were held on the 26th of March. And I'll just go through the pages and ask for any comments if there are for points of accuracy. So page 1. Page 2. Page 3. Page 4. Page 5. Page 6. Only another 6 to go. Page 7. Page 8. Page 9. Page 10. Page 11. And there won't be any on 12 because that's just my signature. So no comments then on the open minutes, so I'll take those as agreed and be virtually signed. Thank you. No open actions for this meeting. Some actions due for future meetings. So if anybody got any comments on the action log, we'll move on. Okay. In which case we'll come to my report. Now, I'll take this as read, and I just want to highlight a couple of things. I mean, the first and most important thing is how the whole trust has responded really to the COVID-19 pandemic. The teamwork, just outstanding, right from any group you can mention. Housekeeping have been doing a sterling job, doing far more than they normally do. Security, all the way through, of course, to the frontline doctors, nurses, for everybody else. I just think it's a testament to excellent leadership from the executive team as well. So thank you for that. I've also been very touched by the community support, and I think that in itself opens up lots more contacts, Andrew and Tom, in your area, that we can, because these are people that make things happen, and that's the sort of people that we want to be getting close to. And I was touched by the Nourish Our Nurses TV program. They are on the Ross Kemp there, Joanne, and leading that. Just one example of many, but people who can make things happen, and we've got some really good links into the local community as a result of this. So I think that's fantastic. We had the Countess of Wessex visitors on the back of that doing her volunteering, and you can see the pictures there, and that was again very well. And that what struck me there was the great teamwork that's been done, particularly by Louise's team, by Karen and Heather from Louise's team, doing a fantastic job with huge numbers of donations of food and things that they're coping with, and trying to make sure that it's dealt with fairly, and all the rest of it has not been an easy task. So that's worth mentioning. And probably last not least is Radio Way continues to be award winning. 2 more awards for Radio Way, and they are really, as hospital radio stations go, they really are fantastic bunch of volunteers doing this in their free time. So many thanks to them. I'll stop at that point. You've read the report and take any questions that you may have. Chris.
Very quick one, Andy. Thanks for that. My question really is around governors. I think it's absolutely right that we have this ongoing communication with them, and thanks to you and Suzanne for doing that. I just, as a Ned, feel a little detached from the governors now in this whole scheme of things, and not that I want another meeting necessarily, but it's just, if we need a quarterly update with them or whatever, with just the Neds, I think that should be undertaken with them, and I'll be open to provide any I guess communication or address any concerns that they may have.
I think that's a great point, Chris. I think we initially obviously suspended all the governor activity because of the NHS England letter said that we should do so. Then we rode back from that with Suzanne and I having these informal meetings, which they appreciate. And I think it's a really good point. As we get to the new normal, if we can use that phrase, we should reinstitute things. Of course, they haven't got all the technology.
No.
So it may have to be a telecon, but certainly we'll take that away, Sal, please, and we'll look at doing something with the Neds, because I think they would appreciate that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Just so they understand there's some sort of intent there.
Yes, that's right. And they were very grateful when Suzanne and I spoke to them, and we're talking to them again next week as well.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Any other questions on my piece? Otherwise, I will say thank you and hand over to Suzanne.
Thank you, Andy. By way of introduction and slightly an apology, my report is extremely long, or very much longer than it would normally be. But I felt it was necessary to reflect really on, an extraordinary time in the organisation, and to try and give some sense to colleagues of just the extreme breadth and scale of activity that has been going on inside the organisation. And as I described, we set ourselves some priorities, and we've held true to those, and now we're starting to think about and augment those priorities as we plan and prepare for restoration recovery and the new operating environment, which we describe now with the response to that as the new operating model. And I suspect Tom will talk about the operating model in due course, because clearly it'll stop being new in a minute. As Andy has done, just to pay, testament to the team, really, all of the team. As I say in the report, I haven't been surprised by the response of Team ASPH. I knew they would rise to the challenge, and of course they have done. But I think it's just to say that, that's quite a glib statement. You can say those things, but it's true. And it's not been without its tragedy. And, our colleagues have both been concerned for their own well-being, the well-being of their families, and also of their colleagues. And, sadly, we've had to provide care to a number of colleagues who've been extremely unwell. And in a number of cases, those colleagues have been in intensive care. And sadly, we've had two members of the team succumb to COVID-19. And that has been a very real and lived experience for everyone here. And these things don't happen in our operating environment. So just to say that, they have done an extraordinary job, but that has been some of the backdrop. And I think we just, as the board, should just pause a moment just to reflect on that. And that's why I've documented it there. Andy's also commented on just unbelievable, overwhelming actually would be a better word, or level of support that we've seen from the community. And together with Andy's report, we've tried to just document some of the key elements of that. David, as you know, practically, no notice, took up the chief executive role while I was dispatched to regional duties. And just to say thank you to David for leading the team through what was the most intense period and doing such a great job. And I know he's well supported by the other executives, but David, thank you. I suppose it's just a sense of where we're at now, and we'll come on to that in some of James's operational report. But you can see there that the volumes of patients is clearly reducing in terms of the COVID specific patients. But we do still have patients in the organisation, and we're starting to hear some concerning reports from other trusts around, particularly in the southwest, as you will know, and some down on the south coast of sort of numbers starting to pick up again. So we do need to be very aware of that potential for a further surge, particularly as the lockdown eases. Just wanted to say thank you to our independent sector providers locally, and we just comment on that in the report, particularly the Woking Nuffield and the BMI Runnymede, who have, really been of great support in enabling us to respond to the crisis. Other things of note within the report I won't touch on in detail. Quite an unbelievable effort from the infection prevention and control team, which is David and Andrea and other members of the team. Particular homage, bow down to Glynis, our infection prevention consultant nurse, who literally barely left the hospital at the beginning of this crisis and was just unbelievable. And we really couldn't have mobilised our initial response without her. And we might want to come back to some of the commentary around visiting restrictions. And I would say that we have really had to hold on to our objective around the visiting restrictions in terms of why we have put in visiting restrictions. And we have put in visiting restrictions very aware of the implications in terms of the emotions and the connections with family. We do understand that, particularly if patients are extremely unwell or at end of life. And whilst we will make adjustments to that, I think it's really key to understand that the reason we did that is a safety reason and for prevention of transmission of this terrible virus. In terms of staff wellbeing, there's an extraordinary lot in the report there, and I'll pick questions up on that. But I suppose as I've returned to the organisation, that's been a key consideration of how, in addition to sort of straightforward health and wellbeing support, and straightforward rather undersells it, how we bring a therapeutic element to that. Some of our team have been through very, very stressful situations and have felt their own safety threatened. So we do need to pay attention to how we respond to that. And Louise may want to pick up more of that in her report. We talk a little bit about, the impact on other services and the fact that we're seeing a diminution of demand starting to pick up now, and how we're going to restore some of the critical services, elective pathways of care within our new world. Quite a lot in the report around digital and the importance of it and the enabling, the key enabler. And actually, it's helped us mobilise the chair. Look at us all here on a board meeting on MS Teams. So we've come leaps and bounds on that front. And then the last thing I'm going to say, there's loads in this report, is I just want to say particularly thank you to the Chief Constable, Gavin Stevens. I saw a blue light serenade being done for another hospital on the South Coast, and I rang him and said, we really have to do something in Surrey. And he responded to that call the same week. And for those of you who didn't see it, you can see it on the YouTube channel there, but the St. Peter's Blue Light Serenade was the lead story on the Clap for Carers 8 o'clock BBC One slot that week. And without Gavin and then all of his colleagues from the ambulance service and the fire service, we would not have had such a remarkable event take place at St. Peter's. And of course, James, for making sure that our social distancing was the best of any show on the BBC before or since. So I'll conclude there. Very happy to take any questions.
Okay, any questions for Suzanne? If you put your virtual hands up. And James.
I just had one question, Suzanne. I know that the plans around what you mentioned, the staff that have passed away, and just what the thinking around how the organisation might recognise that. Is there in?
Yeah, no, James, it's a really good point. I mean, as you know, we marked the minute of national remembrance a few weeks ago. Although having discussed it with Lawrence at the time, Lawrence, our chaplain, we actually felt it was rather too soon. But however, it was a national and we did mark it. I think our feeling is that we'd want to spend some time with the families, but also the teams, to understand what an appropriate memorial event, or how would we do that, but to do it in a really sensitive way with their very leading the sort of design or the input around that, because I think we will need to do that. It's just a question of timing, really, and of course we're not quite out of the woods on that front yet. So I think it's a really good point.
There is a model out there on the organ donation, that what we do around organ donation, bringing the families together. But of course, it's got to be family led. You're absolutely right, because people have different views. Chris, and then Neil.
Thanks very much for that, Suzanne. Actually, incredibly detailed and humbling report. The great around digital, and thanks, James, also for banging that drum with the staff in your weekly update. I think it's a great progress, and hopefully we don't go back to norm. We go back to a new norm. Also around the NOM, I'm looking forward to the detail around that in terms of what that is, and Tom's going to obviously do that. My main question really is around. It truly was humbling and continues to be so in terms of how our frontline staff sort of step up to meet the challenge. And, I've said this before in emails, but I really wonder whether, not should, but will we recognise and consider awards for all frontline staff, or perhaps exceptional individuals, and how might we do that? Or do we just acknowledge this in the annual staff award somehow? So I just wanted to start that ball rolling as to, is there something tangible we might be able to do?
No, thank you for that, those reflections and comments, Chris. I mean, I think you're absolutely right. The question we need to consider is, how do you reward everybody? Because there isn't a single soul who didn't step up in some way. Yeah. But certainly, I think Louise and I have had a conversation about how would we play this through into the routine staff awards ceremony, which clearly will be everything other than routine when we get to it. And how do we make judgments about how we value and recognise the contribution of such a wide-ranging set of contributions? But I think it's something we as a board ought to have that probably a more detailed conversation on, so that we get it right and we make sure our values and the things that we value are reflected in the awards that we give.
Yeah.
And, you know, because there is a predominant, you know, not to say that if you pick out, you know, that the team in ITU haven't done a great job, they have done a great job. But there are, you know, the cleaners, the porters, people that have sorted the supplies and the PPE. I mean, unbelievable. But they're not often very much in the spotlight. And so we just need to make sure there's balance, you know, and it's a tricky one to get right. But I think you're absolutely right. We must celebrate the
And maybe it's a celebration of the whole community, because of course other emergency service and support
exactly, and the community
institution.
Yeah. I mean, our community day has obviously been postponed, and we had a thought about bringing that together with the AGM and making it a community celebration. So there is something to think about, but I suppose we've got to get to be in a position of having something to celebrate. And, you know, whilst the hospital might be in a slightly sort of diminished operational challenge, we've got the thought that something is coming, and obviously then you've got the economic impacts that are probably going to start to be felt locally. And, you know, looking at sort of only seeing yesterday McLaren losing, was it 1,200 jobs?
Yeah.
So it's going to be tricky times, and of course some of those jobs will be lost by partners and family members of the team here.
Yes.
So, but I think it's a really good point. And Louise, I don't know if you want to comment, we'll come back to it in the people report.
Okay, so Neil and then David.
Thank you. I echo Chris's comment. It's a genuinely humbling report, and I just wanted to place on record my thanks to you and all of the executives. I think you have done an astonishing job, and that flows right the way down through the entirety of the hospital. The question to ask, or to get your view on, or to reflect on, is, with the new operating model, incidentally, I'm glad you didn't call that target operating model, or else we'd be talking to Tom about Tom. So I like Nom as opposed to Tom. But in the new operating model, I think there's space for us somehow as a board collectively to reflect upon what we've been able to accelerate and change at pace as a result of the crisis, that weren't opportunities that we were confronting previously where we've had to respond, and actually how we embed as much of that as possible, as quickly as possible, and whether there are any other issues in the past that we previously said that's too difficult, we can't get to that, which in a crisis situation, funnily enough, we might have managed to solve. So I guess I'm looking for some insight around how this process will accelerate the pace of change and build upon what we are all learning from this pandemic crisis. I'm expecting that to be a debate that we have in strategic change, but if there's a first reaction, I'd welcome it. But that's the kind of steer. But thank you all.
No, I mean, Neil, I think that's really helpful, and thank you for your positive feedback as well and reflections. I mean, you're absolutely right, and I suppose there's two things, isn't there? So there's the strategy. The Together We Care strategy is extant, and clearly the board is accountable and responsible for the strategy. This is an updated operational delivery model based on our emergent context. So there isn't anything within the new operating model that we didn't already have our eye on, because it was set out within the strategy. But this is giving us some opportunity and requirement, frankly, to do some of that a bit differently. And I think you're 100% right, Neil. I think this has been the sort of conversation right the way along, is where we have been able to accelerate or actually achieve, you know, digitally enabled flexible working. We've got to hang on to that and not let those things slide back. But there's a whole range of opportunities. I mean, you're just looking at the Riverbourne opportunity we've just discussed. There's a conversation about moving more services out of the trust, which are actually now really an important requirement for safety purposes. So I think that's right. Just check with Tom if you think there's anything different to add there.
Well, I mean, I think you've said the main ones. I mean, the very obvious one is the digital opportunity, and you know, the huge acceleration that we've had in the uptake of non-face-to-face outpatients, and I haven't spoken to anybody who wants to allow that to slip back. Anybody, you know, clinicians, managers, anyone. So I mean, we've absolutely embedded that into the operating model. We've also embedded in there, you know, things that were pre-existing principles around, you know, the right intervention at the right time, minimizing variability. So, it's an opportunity to really bring GIRF, for instance, back, and so that's a core of what we do. And looking wider across Surrey, it's an opportunity for us to really get into those conversations about what's the right scale to deliver some of these services. If we are separating green and blue streams of patients, actually, we need to do that in all the hospital facilities across Surrey. It doesn't make any sense for us just to do it in our estate. So there's a very clear mandate, I think, that we recognise across Surrey now to do that. And I suppose the other example, Suzanne's mentioned the sort of team working and the virtual meetings. We held last week the first virtual team talk. We had 150 members of the team involved in that, and I dare say another 150 or so on then watching it afterwards. So it's just such a great opportunity to reach out wider and do that piece around inclusivity and engagement across the organisation. So all of those are essentially chapter headings in the operating model, and then there's some detailed parameters that then get added onto that.
Okay, so just before I move us on, David's got a question or comment.
Well, it was a comment on the back of Chris and Suzanne's question. It's about the question will be asked, what did you do in COVID 2020? And I'm slightly worried there'll be different groups to that, and it goes along with what you think. I mean, I've spent a lot of time with the cleaners, and they've done an unbelievable job, and so many people have done an unbelievable job. But there is also people who, by virtue of the fact that they're very vulnerable, had to stay at home and shield, and I'm slightly worried about them as well. And there's a bit this kind of guilt that goes on, and I don't want to fan that. The other remarkable thing is that the community, how much they've supported us, but also how much they've supported each other. I mean, community cohesion, people dropping food off to their neighbours and things like that, and checking they're all right. I mean, when did that happen in Surrey? I mean, it's just unbelievable what happened in the community. And they've done this in a backdrop when lots of them are suffering from a lot of financial hardship. And I think that when we come out of this, rather than, I think, continue with applauding ourselves too much, we've got to make sure that we move into supporting the community mode, supporting the employment, or just supporting the care of the community as a focus. And I suppose we've also got to get ready for the fact that when we come out of this, and when we've reflected on what we do, we will learn things that probably we should have done slightly different. And actually, the narrative and the media, I mean, I think the only people that I wouldn't give any credit for COVID 2020 are the media, actually. And I think when we come out of this, that they're looking for stories and things where we could have done things better. And there will be places where we could have done that. And we have to get ready for that. And I think we've got to keep telling each other, we did our best and the community did our best, and everyone did their best in this. And not let that message get kind of distorted or corrupted or whatever.
Yeah, no, I agree.
A good discussion. So I can ask really for just very brief final comments. I've got Louise and Andrew, but please keep it brief because we've got a long agenda.
My comment was really just following David's around people who are either self-isolating, working from home, or shielding, and the potential for social isolation and feelings of guilt. So we talked about this on the Schwartz round. We did a virtual Schwartz round as well as team talk last week. And we've agreed that our next Schwartz round would be using that as the topic. So we're at the moment just collecting stories from people who are in that position and making sure that we are inclusive with some of the stories that we're sharing as well. I think the other thing that Suzanne and I are planning is a team talk that we will do with, again, those people who are not on site specifically, so that we can answer any questions in relation to that. And there is always more we can do with people at home or shielding. And so we are going back through the list of names to make sure that where possible, we're offering them opportunity to work, because I think that's the most important thing, but also just making sure that there's a connection with their line manager and that's in place.
Thanks, Louise. And that Schwartz round was really quite moving, actually. That was very good. Andrew, final one for you.
Yeah, I agree with everything that David's saying, and this is obviously a very significant moment in the history of a community, and we'll remember it going forward, probably in 100 years' time, actually. So it's just a thought, as I shared with Tom and one or two colleagues, a restoration and recovery paper, which was just some thoughts about how you might capture some of this in a way that involves people, but also is quite therapeutic, actually, and makes really something of it. So it might be quite good, Tom, if you shared that with Louise and one or two others, because we'd be happy to engage with that, actually, so that it's not only do you capture something for the future, maybe it's an artwork, maybe it's something that really turns it into something positive, top, middle and bottom, all levels, but also enables people to participate and engage, even a family who've lost a loved one or whatever. But maybe if you just share those thoughts, we'd be happy to pick up that conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, thank you, Andrew. And actually, there is quite a lot of different strands sort of underway around capturing images, feelings, as you say, stories of both the community. And I wondered, Tom, if we ought to bring some sort of plan through with Louise. I know David's been looking at it, because I think actually archiving and developing our story is really important, and we've got different strands of work underway, but we probably haven't presented a kind of a coherent, because we've kind of done it as we've gone along, haven't we?
I think that's right. I think that's probably an action for me and Louise to work together on.
Okay.
I mean, just one final point. It might also be one of the foundation stones that leads into some of this new operational model and some of the links we've been hearing into the community this morning. It becomes a very positive thing with regard to the future, rather than a negative thing.
Yeah.
And I think just slightly in defence of the media, we've had some fantastic media coverage, basically around the volunteering, and I think the news is different. But I think we've had some very good local media coverage, exceptional, and I think but we're absolutely right. We have to get ready for the inevitable, what went wrong piece that will follow all of this. But I do want to say, thank you to the media who've really highlighted some of the volunteering things and some of the things that have been going on, because they've been, that part of the media have been doing a very positive job. Right, we're going to move us on. Thank you for that. So, Suzanne, do you want to give a verbal update on the COVID situation in particular?
No, not really.
It's on the agenda.
So, I mean, I think really that would be for the operational, for James to do as part of his operational report. I mean, I've given the numbers in my report, but...
Did you want me to say a few words, Andy, or should we...
Yeah, James, just a brief few, highlight. I think just highlight where we are today, and then we can move on to the detail of the operational report.
Thanks,
sure. So the number of patients that we have in the organisation is falling and continues to fall. And the graph that we've had in the COVID dashboard, which is the number of patients by day, there's one of the metrics that my team put together every day, and that's in the COVID dashboard. That line where it's flattened out has continued up until about 5 days ago, and then it's come down again. So in the hospital at the moment, we have around 20 inpatients who are confirmed COVID, and we're about 5 or 6 now in ITU, depending on what's happening there. So that's come down significantly, and we're looking to we're looking to organise the beds we organise sort of daily, weekly as a result of that, because that means we have less cohort areas and there's things we can do. And as our testing has ramped up as well, it means that we need less holding areas to understand COVID status, which was at one point we would have around 50 patients. We were waiting to understand their COVID status, and now that has dropped significantly because of one of the reasons why, because our testing has increased and become more rapid. In terms of ITU, we're looking now at how we bring that down into a single footprint, so that takes some pressure off. And in the performance report, I want to talk about how we're able then to move staff around again into the more normal areas of activity. But the sort of peri-COVID world is quite different. So the things that we're looking at now are what are the fallout of COVID and how does that affect the way we run the hospital on a daily basis? The requirement to have beds 2 meters apart and other things. I'll probably pick up on in my performance one a bit more detail, but that's the impact that we're facing at the moment. Isn't necessarily how many COVID we've got in the organisation, but what it's like operating a hospital in a peri-COVID world. Yeah,
thanks, Suzanne.
So sorry, having said I didn't have anything to say, of course that I do. But just that hot updates really, I suppose. So the things that are sort of in my mind now and we're just discussing here that are just new and we haven't really got a plan for yet, if you like. So antibody testing. So we do have a plan for that and that's developing quite well, and we will start to roll antibody testing out towards the end of this week. And you will see more communications and so on coming through around that. The key, just to make sure that all the board colleagues understand, is that antibody testing doesn't and will not alter our operational practice or deployment of staff at all, because the demonstrated immunity through that test, if there is immunity for an individual, it cannot be relied upon to provide protection at this point. First thing. Second thing is obviously yesterday, track, trace, I don't know what we're calling it, track and trace. I think the isolation's been dropped from the strapline. Has been introduced at 9 o'clock, fully operational 9 o'clock this morning apparently. And at the moment, unless Louise has seen anything, I have seen no guidance about what the operational implications are in our operational environment in terms of the workforce. So, you know, again, I've got no estimation on the extent to which we're going to experience colleagues ringing up. We'll have to start to record all of this, Louise, you know, colleagues isolating at home because they've been contacted by the tracing service, and the extent to which we need to implement that in the hospital or operationalise that within the hospital, I just don't know. I mean, clearly, nearly all of our clinical teams will be having contact, not without PPE, of course. So that might be the saving grace on this one, but no guidance as yet.
No guidance, no. There is a national HR director's call today, so I'm wondering whether it might be on that.
Okay.
Fast-moving environment as always at the moment. Yeah. So, okay, thanks, Suzanne. Mike, just before we go into the quality report, from the quality committee point of view, anything that you'd like to draw to our attention on this report?
Yeah, thank you. I didn't contribute to the discussion from Suzanne's, but I echo everything that was said. I think it's an astounding performance. So great, and it's nice to see that James has been rewarded with the corner office. So I think the four things that we noted, because we take the quality report, the performance report, and the SIRI report. So I think that the observation that I would make, James can speak to it, is the performance report. The graphs are like a King Canute moment, aren't they? They show a complete transformation of the organisation. It stopped doing one thing and started doing another. So I think it's just mindful to reflect on that. And we stress test the report on three main areas. The continued reporting of
We're losing you, Mike.
And sorry, and Andrea will talk to that, I'm sure. The learning from the COVID experience, both in terms of outcome of the patients and the risks. So we explored that a lot with David, and I'm sure that will be part of his report. And then we were quite exercised by this transition to a mixed COVID, non-COVID economy and how that is reflected in testing. So again, that's something that might be spoken about by the presenters of the papers. Those are the major areas for us.
Okay, thank you, Mike. So with that said, then, Andrea, would you like to just give us the highlights, please? The top few things you want us to draw attention to.
I'll take obviously the report as read. I suppose there's a couple of things just to really draw out of it. Is that the first one is we've set out the new quality priorities for 2020-21, and that's illustrated in the report. Very much builds on the quality priorities that we did have for 2019-2020, but we've got some more robust targets within that now, in particular around harms. the first point I'd like to draw out is about medication safety. We've got a new target of any harm to be less than 9.5 incidents per month, and this was achieved for April. And I think the number of incidents are down for April, as are the number of incidents with harm as well. And there's a couple of reasons around that. Reduction in agency staff, I think, has been a key influence. Clearly, the reduction in bed utilisation during April obviously was an influence of that as well. But two particular areas that's felt by the medication improvement team that has really helped with the reduction is around the senior consultant support, the 7-day coverage, which no doubt James will bring out in his performance report. They have, particularly within the medicine division, gone to a 4-day on, 4-day off rota in order to have that 7-day provision. So there would be no difference at a weekend. And that really has provided senior, as I said, decision makers on the ward, which has supported the junior doctors. And for the junior doctors, they have been allocated wards during the COVID situation, which has meant that they've been in particular areas for a longer length of time, which has enabled them to embed into that environment and also really to understand the processes as well. So it's felt that they have been contributing factors to that medication safety aspect. And the medication safety programme is about to start up again. Obviously, it has been face-to-face, and they're looking at how to do that now going forward with social distancing. The other area I'd like to bring out is really important, is about the infection prevention and control aspects, and in particular the strategy, the IPC strategy. And I did mention last time about the key areas that we're really focusing on with regards to this. I mean, it is our North Star objective within the new operating model, and it is about ending health and care acquired infection in order to deliver our trust mission, which is deliver obviously high quality and sustainable healthcare services. But I think really what anything that we do now going forward, whether that's a service change or just enacting a new initiative, then it's IPC, the infection prevention control, has got to be at the forefront of everybody's minds, and how they're going to implement that in ensuring that they're adopting the right principles around IPC. So our strategy is focused on the reducing footfall within the hospital environment, really strengthening our infection prevention control practice. It's also about the decontamination, not just of equipment, but also of the environment as well. And we're looking at the domestic service with regard to that, and doing enhanced cleaning and looking at the teams as well. And then the last area is obviously about that design and making sure that the redesign of areas is fit for purpose. And we've already done that with our COVID and non-COVID areas. Obviously now looking to have Ashford as our ultra clean elective site, and St Peter's being our non-elective site as well. So that's the key principles around the IPC strategy, but also underpinning that now is we're going to put some meat on the bones, and that's particularly looking at the organisms, because it's not just about COVID, it's about all hospital acquired infections and preventing cross transmission and cross infection. So we're looking at the specific organisms that we need to focus on, and the interventions that are particularly required in order to stop transmission. So that's a piece of work that we're currently operating on at the moment. All really good, and clearly is going to be a pivotal piece of work that'll be inform the teams in, as I said, in how they go forward with the new operating model. And the only other thing I'll finish on really is the harms. As you'll see in the report, pressure damage has increased during the COVID time, and also the VTE, the thrombolysis as well has increased, and that's again down to the what's happening within our COVID patients around those particular areas. The pressure ulcers has increased due to intensive care. And the proning that we need to do with those patients, which ultimately is you're turning the patient onto their front to improve their oxygenation, but that causes facial damage with the ET tubes, and you can't compromise the airway with regards to that. So it's actual pressure damage around the face. And then with the VTE, we've noticed with the COVID patients that there is a thrombolysis that takes place within the lungs, in particular at the alveoli area, that we didn't expect, and there's trials of obviously treatment that's going on to deal with that, but that's just to explain why we've seen increases in those particular areas. I think I'll stop there, Andy, and if there's any questions, I'm very happy to.
Suzanne's got hand up, and David. Suzanne?
I've put my hand down. Sorry.
Oh, okay. David?
I was just going to add on, because I don't know if people remember, but just before we went into COVID, we had a Clostridium difficile outbreak, which actually closed 8 wards. And we put quite stringent measures in place and got that under control really quickly, actually, within 2 weeks. But it was a good way of upping our IPC practices within the trust and getting ready for COVID. And I think the fascinating thing is if you look at this report and everything, and you look at all the other infections and see what's happening to those other infections, we've got to watch it over time. But, you know, if we get the IPC right, it will stop all transmission of all infections. Particularly we've seen, you know, we haven't had E. coli bacteremia, and although that is usually not a hospital-acquired thing, you know, the IPC practices throughout the whole community, nursing homes, has improved with all this. And I think it's having a really big impact and improvement on everything else. Mike, you made a really good point about COVID and therapies for COVID, and what are we learning from it. And, you know, as you see from the figures, if you're admitted with COVID and need to stay in, the mortality is very high. It's about 1/3. And we do need to see if that's improved with time with some of the ventilation options that we're taking. And there are some new developments of medications that are coming online. So remdesivir, which was developed, I think, initially for Ebola, has been showing some benefit, and maybe that will be available coming forward. And the use of steroids in certain cases is now often used. So it will be interesting, Mike, I think, to do that longitudinal study and actually look at the IGNAR data and see if things have changed on that. The issue with the IGNAR data, which is probably the best data around, is that the non-invasive ventilation and the intubation patients, they actually changed kind of types of cohort. So in fact, the intubated then became a higher risk group with a poorer outlook. But I think we need to tease some of those things out. I think you're right. But I think, you know, I think it does all point towards the bits that the things that we've been working on for the last few years, which is medication safety and infection control. And I think it's brought a focus to that, which has just raised the game. And we were reflecting, Andrea and Suzanne and me, about, you know, 30 years ago, what was the infection control practices in the hospitals like? And it was very, very different from what it is now. I think we have relaxed in modern day medicine. We have gone for productivity and efficiency and throughput and jamming things in. And actually, we need to take a breath about that, because actually that is causing a huge amount of illness. Some of the figures on the transmission of COVID in hospitals, I think, and I think I'm right when I say it. You know, 20%. There was a 20% transmission rate in most hospitals. Well, that's the average, and it was lower in ours. So it's just an illustration that in going forward, the hospitals are can be the focus or the nidus for the spread of all these things, and that's why we've got to be really, really careful how we relax our measures as the rest of society relax their measures, because it's so important in our wards.
I'd just like to add on, sorry, from what David just said. Just a correction, David. It was a norovirus outbreak.
Sorry.
Yeah, just obviously. But it did absolutely set us up for dealing with the COVID situation. There's no two ways about that on our reflections with regards to the, as I said, the IPC principles. And then just going back to the actual COVID transmission now, we're mandated now to report our figures up, as are all trusts actually, and they consider that the definitions around COVID transmission is if it's a definitive hospital acquired transmission if the patient has been in the hospital for 14 days, or from the 15-day point onwards, they then become symptomatic. That's clear that they have contracted the COVID from the hospital, and it's a possibility that they have contracted it within the hospital if it's from 7 7 to 14 days, and we're having to report against that at the moment. And as David said, at the moment, that the definitive transmission numbers, what we're seeing nationally, is at 20%, which is quite interesting. I mean, our data that we've just analysed, we're at 2.2%. So we think, again, that it's down to, you know, obviously the key interventions that we've put in place, but going back to norovirus did definitely tee us up in the right way to deal with it.
Okay, thank you. We've got questions coming in from Jane first, then Marcin.
Okay, thank you. It's a question, Andrea, around the increase in pressure damage due to proning. It's really just, do we have any idea how we compare with other acute trusts? Because obviously we recognise it as a national issue, and is there going to be any learning around that to try and, you know, I don't know whether it's preventable at all.
Yeah, so it's a good question. So absolutely, we are aligned with the other trusts, and in fact, we've got our local network that my harms-free care nurse consultant is engaged with, and they're currently just looking at the. I mean, it's so difficult, Jane, to be able to just prevent this just through the, you know, due to the actual benefit proning gives the patients with the oxygenation to be able to sort of try and. But they are looking at different strategies around that, so we are working through it.
Okay, thank you.
Marcin?
Thank you. My question was related that David had already raised, which was the transfer rate. At Quality of Care Committee, you said you didn't know and you were looking at it. Now you've said you've got a model from the national, which is to look at patient-related transfer. How does that relate to your overall comment about the transfer of the infection of COVID to staff and then their families and into the community? And have you got any more statistics on that? Thank you.
So, and Andrea can join in with me. We're getting more and more. So we've got a piece of software which is giving us that information. And the reason why we haven't kind of exposed it fully is we're checking because it looks quite good. And what we're doing is we're making sure that all the information's on there. And what it does is it tracks when someone develops a positive swab. You know, was it when it was taken when they came in, or did it happen further on in their stay? And we're also doing that. We're also trying to do that for staff as well. So, Andrew, there was an area that we were worried there was a bit of an outbreak between staff, wasn't there? And I think I might be wrong. Was that the recovery ITU? So we're trying to track. You know, when we have staff who become symptomatic, is it a cluster? Because one of our concerns is that you have very good IPC practices when you're in the clinical environment, but when you're slightly outside that environment, then you relax a bit. And that's one of our thoughts, and why we spent quite a lot of time making sure the social distancing in the postgraduate centre. But there's lots of kind of coffee rooms and little things like that dotted around, and that's our concern for the staff. It might not actually be in the clinical area, outside, and we are trying to track that as well. But it's quite difficult to tease that out for now.
Yeah. Okay.
Do you want to add anything, Andrea, to that?
No, I think you make a very valid point. I think it's very difficult to say whether or not the transmissions happened within the actual clinical bubble or outside, and we've got challenges in both of those areas. I mean, we've implemented strict procedures in place within the clinical area, but it's making sure that we adopt that outside in the areas where staff rest, and as you said, we're doing all of that piece of work now and ensuring that staff social distance, and it's important for them to have the downtime and to get out of the areas, but we need to do it safely. So really, it is difficult to be able to determine that transmission.
Okay, thank you. Any more questions on this before we move on? Thank you for the report, and thank you also to the Quality Committee for going through the report in detail beforehand. So obviously done a good job there. Thank you. Right, Mike, the minutes, the rather older minutes from the Quality Committee.
Yeah, as Suzanne said, you look back at these things and the world's changed before your very eyes, hasn't it? I think just to take read, I think we've checked them. I'm happy to answer questions.
Any questions then on those minutes? Okay, so I'm aware that 3 hours on a Teams meeting is quite a long time, and I'm also aware that Sal is recording this, which means you end up with huge files because they're video files. For all those reasons, I'm going to call a 5-minute break now so that we can break and restart, and also give people a chance to go grab a quick cup of coffee. And but it's literally a 5-minute pause that will allow Sal to stop the recording and then start a new file. Okay, so 5 minutes. Thank you.